This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. DavidFeldmanShow.com. Check out my website. That is pretty informative. Check it out. The war with Iran is back on. The United States has just completed its 10th day of a renewed bombing campaign, hitting civilian infrastructure that, according to Iran, included a desalination plant, leaving 10,000 Iranians without drinking water. If true, that constitutes another of the hundreds, if not thousands, of war crimes committed by this administration under the leadership, at least the military is under the leadership of our defense chief, Pete Hegseth, who, along with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, testified before the Senate Senate Appropriations Committee Tuesday, begging both houses of Congress to pass an emergency $87 billion, possibly a $95 billion war supplemental, where all but $20 billion would go towards funding the illegal war with Iran. It was Hegseth and Kane on Tuesday warning Congress that they are about to run out of money. The Pentagon is about to run out of money and will not be able to fund the war in Iran by August 1st, by the end of July. In the past 4 weeks, in the past week, 4 U.S. soldiers have been killed by Iran, 100 wounded. So far, 17 soldiers have been killed, nearly 400 wounded since the war began on February 28th. The New York Times reporting that Tuesday's testimony was the first time since their early May press conference that Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Pete Hegseth have talked publicly about how this terrific war is going. Hegseth testified Tuesday that so far the war has cost $37.7 billion. Reuters reporting, however, in May, he said it cost $29 billion. Must be inflation. Hegseth did admit under oath, the Democrats were able to get Hegseth to admit under oath that Iran still has military capabilities. The last press conference he held in May, we've destroyed all their military capabilities. Democrats on Tuesday got him to admit, not really. So maybe he learned a little about the truth. Maybe. Hegseth sounded the alarm that despite a nearly $1 trillion budget for 2026, without an additional 60 some odd billion dollars in emergency spending, we will be unable to replenish our stockpiles, and he warned we'd have to curtail key essential training for our soldiers. That's what he said on television Tuesday. So he must hate America. I mean, to divulge that kind of top secret information, Pete Hegseth is a traitor, guilty of treason. He said on national television on Tuesday, we need to replenish our stockpiles, that we're out of ammunition. You never tell the enemy we're running low on ammunition and don't have enough money to fund a war. Pete Hegseth hates America. More on his testimony and the war momentarily. Donald Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence, the brilliant Jay Clayton, cleared the Senate Intelligence Committee by a vote of 9-8 on Tuesday and will reach the Senate for a full vote sometime next week. Clayton is currently the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, arguably one of the most powerful positions inside the Justice Department. Trump's plan is to get Clayton confirmed as head of DNI and then put McDonald, his personal lawyer, in as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Eastern New York. Southern District of New York. Having a little trouble thinking clearly today. Well, it was during those confirmation hearings that Tom Cotton had to cut them short. Tom Cotton, the authoritarian crypto-fascist and chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, he grew disgusted by the line of questioning from Democrats because it was during these confirmation hearings that Clayton actually took the blame for the names, addresses, phone numbers, and sometimes even nude photos of Epstein's victims all getting revealed during January's release of the Epstein files. It was Jay Clayton. It was his responsibility to pore over sealed grand jury testimony to ensure the documents could be made public while at the same time guaranteeing the safety, security, and privacy of all the Epstein victims. Instead, Jay Clayton victimized the victims. One of the reasons Trump wants to make him director of national intelligence. He victimized the victims instead of redacting their names, addresses, phone numbers, even nude photos were made public due to what Jay Clayton described as a technical review error. But this is the guy Trump wants in charge of our nation's 18 spy agencies. He already proved how qualified he is to be the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. During his hearings, Clayton refused to answer Georgia Democrat Jon Ossoff's repeated attempts for Clayton to tell him whether Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Clayton, again, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, also testified under oath that he had no idea that Tulsi Gabbard, who served as Director of National Intelligence until the end of June, this is the job Clayton is up for, he said, I had no idea until Jon Ossoff told him that Tulsi Gabbard, who was Director of National Intelligence until the end of June, that she assisted the FBI back in January when it raided the Fulton County, Georgia elections office to seize ballots from the 2020 presidential election. Clayton could offer no opinion as to whether that was appropriate for Tulsi Gabbard to be there or legal. Had no opinion, didn't know that the person who held the job he wants, top spy, he didn't know that, and had no opinion on Tulsi Gabbard assisting the FBI in seizing ballots in order to further Donald Trump's lie that the election was stolen. There is not a single shred of evidence votes in Georgia or any place else were tampered with during the 2020 election. Although they might be, now that they're in the hands of FBI Director Kash Patel. I'm not exactly optimistic about any chain of custody that includes Kash Patel as one of the links. If confirmed, Jay Clayton would replace the current acting director of national intelligence, Bill Pulte, who has used his brief tenure as director of national intelligence to provide Donald Trump with phony intelligence assessments about Chinese interference in our elections that Donald Trump then cited in last week's speech on election integrity. If you were masochistic enough to watch that, Trump came perilously close to concluding that speech with, and therefore, until I can be certain of free and fair elections, I am hereby invoking the Insurrection Act and canceling this year's midterms. I mean, I really did expect him to say that. Meanwhile, the Senate Judiciary Committee is holding their vote on acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to become permanent Attorney General. That vote is now in abeyance until Chuck Grassley, the Republican chair, can be certain that Republican holdouts Tom Tillis and John Cornyn are on board. At least one of them has to be on board, because with Lindsey Graham dead, all it takes is either Cornyn or Tillis to vote no on Blanche, and then the Senate Judiciary Committee remains deadlocked at 10-10, meaning Blanche's name cannot be sent to the floor for a full vote from the Senate. But Cornyn and Tillis were at the White House on Tuesday getting their arms twisted by Donald Trump. And by twisted, their voice boxes throttled until they could no longer breathe. Tom Tillis, the Maverick, said his vote hinged on two conditions. One, that Todd Blanche meet with Epstein's survivors, which Todd Blanche immediately did, and left the survivors even more traumatized. But Tom Tillis, the big Maverick, said, "Good job. I'm very proud of him." Tillis is also demanding the White House guarantee that that $1.8 billion weaponization fund for so-called victims of the Biden Justice Department is permanently put to bed. This despite assurances from Todd Blanche that it is. But despite Todd Blanche testifying under oath that the weaponization fund is dead, despite his two filings with two separate judges that the weaponization fund is dead, there are now reports that he has plans to revive it. Tom Tillis insisting that the White House agree to some sort of written promise that there will not be a weaponization fund. Texas Senator John Cornyn is said to be still on the fence when it comes to Todd Blanche, but says, "I want to get to yes." Cornyn, who lost his reelection bid in the Republican primaries to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton receiving an endorsement from Donald Trump, well, Cornyn on Tuesday threatened to kill the nomination of Kari Lake, the Arizona Senate and gubernatorial candidate, as well as world-class election denier, who Trump picked to serve as our ambassador to Jamaica. Cornyn also threatening to kill Doug Mastriano's nomination for ambassador to Slovakia. Mastriano was the January Sixer who lost the 2022 Pennsylvania race for governor by 15 points to Democrat Josh Shapiro. These are the people we're filling our State Department with. Cornyn said he will vote against both Lake and Mastriano unless Donald Trump releases the funding already earmarked and spent and allocated for PEPFAR, a program set up by George W. Bush to fight the spread of AIDS in Africa. Even Jesse Helms, the segregationist, was for PEPFAR, but not this administration. The British medical journal Lancet estimates that Donald Trump's, Marco Rubio's, and Elon Musk's cut to U.S. aid, if left in place, will end up killing 14 million people worldwide over the next 4 years, 1/3 of them children. So far, it is estimated that as many as 500, possibly 1 million people have died in the past year and few months that Marco Rubio's cuts to U.S. aid were put into effect. A lot of blood, on Marco Rubio's hands and Elon Musk's hands. A lot of blood, a lot of dead children because of pro-lifer Marco Rubio. Meanwhile, the New York Times out with a new report that the Justice Department's Pardon Office, under the leadership of former January 6 defense lawyer Ed Martin, well, he has ignored close to 6,000 clemency applications, according to the New York Times, in order to focus on granting clemency to Trump's donors, friends, and political allies, including 20 individuals who had been fined by the EPA for violating the Clean Air Act. This is the mop-up. I'm David Feldman in New York. Thank you for finding me. If you would like to read all the articles that helped me prepare today's episode, head on over to davidfeldmanshow.com, hit the menu button that's labeled Show Prep, and you'll get all the articles sitting on my desk that I've read. And because this is updated every 15 minutes, these are articles I'm about to read. It's a feed tailored specifically for me. It's the show prep section of davidfeldmanshow.com. It's completely free, and it's the best source for late breaking news in America because it's specifically tailored to satisfy David Feldman's needs, updated every 15 minutes. So it's pretty great. I'm pretty proud of it. Also, if you would like the actual notes I'm struggling to work off this evening to do this nightmare of a show, I can't speak straight today. But if you would like why don't you, this is what you can do, because anybody could do what I'm doing better than I'm doing. You can have my show notes and start your own podcast by clicking on the button that says The Big Dig over at davidfeldmanshow.com. Hit the Big Dig menu, and you can download for free of charge what I'm looking at right now, and then go host your own podcast with these notes. Or if you just want to dig deeper, if you heard this show and there's some stuff today that you're curious about or you want to remember, you want to use as evidence if you're fighting with people, hit the Big Dig button over davidfeldmanshow.com. And while you're over there, sign up for my newsletter and join my fan club. I have a fan club. I am the permanent president pro tem of the David Feldman, the official David Feldman fan club. And if you're accepted into my fan club, there's special treats that you get. But you have to be accepted into this very exclusive, it's rarefied air that you're breathing if you get accepted into the David Feldman Show fan club. If you want my show notes, the show prep, you can just take. That I don't care about. But my show notes, I find they're kind of proprietary. I don't want people just grabbing them. So you have to surrender your first name and your email address, just so I know you're a real person. You're not a bot scraping the internet to train large language models. I do require your email address so I know you're a legitimate person. And I do want your email address because I'm being throttled by these big corporations, and I need to be able to communicate, if I have to, with people who want to read my show notes, quite frankly. If you're interested in my show notes, I'm interested in you. And sign up for my newsletter. Where am I? Okay, Speaker Mike Johnson showing signs that he may be willing to break with Trump on the war, as new polling shows this war in Iran is the least popular war in modern polling history. Since polling units began measuring approval ratings for wars, this is now the least popular war. And that spells trouble for House Republicans come November. Although it shouldn't be this close, and it is. Democrats are within the margin of error when it comes to winning back the House. It should not be this close. And it says something about the lack of character here in the United States. It says something about the American people that this election should even be close. So, Mike Johnson, good man, he's pushing right now for something called Reconciliation 3.0. Now, reconciliation is a process in the Senate. He's in the House. But reconciliation is how you can pass a bill so long as it's a budget bill. You can get it passed in the Senate with a simple majority. It's filibuster proof. That's what reconciliation is. Okay, this is a supplemental. The 2026 federal budget, I'm going to explain to you what a supplemental is, because I'm disgusted. I'm just disgusted and disgusting. I'm disgusted by the coverage that I'm reading about what's going on right now. And I'll explain to you why I'm disgusted, because nobody explains any of this. And it's including well-respected sources of information. So let me just quickly go over this. I do this once or twice a year because it's important. The 2026 federal budget came in at $7.4 trillion. And because we cut taxes for the richest 1% and corporations, the government only took in $5.6 trillion. Do the math. We spent $7.4 trillion in fiscal year 2026, but because of tax cuts, we only took in $5.6 trillion. So we had close to a $2 trillion debt or deficit, which becomes part of our debt. Why does it become part of our debt? Well, the $2 trillion deficit gets transferred to our debt because we have to sell $2 trillion worth of treasury bonds to finance that debt, and then we have to pay interest on those treasury bonds. And roughly 10% of the $7.4 trillion we spent in 2026, 10% of that $7.4 trillion goes towards paying the interest on those bonds we had to issue so we could spend money we didn't have because billionaires and corporations won't pay their fair share. And despite nearly $1 trillion going to the Pentagon for fiscal year 2026, they can't afford to keep the war in Iran going. This is really important. And you need to, I don't mean to be, well, I do mean to be a scold. This is what it's all about. This is what it is all about. I'm going to show you how to concentrate your mind and only argue with people the important points. When they're doing the gish gallop on you, this is the stuff you focus on. Okay? So despite nearly $1 trillion going to the Pentagon, they can't afford this war. How do we know they can't afford it? We don't, because nobody can audit the Pentagon. They've tried for decades. It's impossible. So what's the answer? Throw more money at it. And we have to take Pete Hegseth's word for it. Because when has Pete Hegseth ever lied to the American people? Right now, Mike Johnson, who just said we need to wrap this war up real soon, he wants the House to pass a $95 billion supplemental before summer break, which could be 5 or 6 weeks. We need a new budget by October 1st. The fiscal year for 2027 begins October 1st, which is about 2 months away. And Mike Johnson has no budget, so he's sending everybody home for 5 weeks. Okay. So he wants the House to pass Reconciliation 3.0. That means they would pass a $95 billion supplemental, which means it's a supplement to the 2026 budget, which is almost done, right? October 1st, it's supposed to be the 2027 budget. So this is the only thing that matters. This is the only way you can argue and change our country. You have to understand the budget, okay? We are spending in fiscal year 2026 $7.4 trillion. If a $90 billion supplemental is passed, that means we tack on an additional $90 billion to our $7.4 trillion budget, making it a $7.5 trillion budget, give or take a few billion. That's how it doesn't work. This is not working, but that's the plan. And we don't have $95 billion. We don't. Because we lowered taxes once again on the rich and the richest corporations. So, what happens when Pete Hegseth gets his 95? How do we pay for that $95 billion for fiscal year 2026, which is coming to an end on October 1st? And it's been put to bed. All the taxes earmarked for 2026 have been collected and spent, and we were close to $2 trillion in debt. So where does the $90 billion come from, or $95 billion come from? Well, we have to borrow it. Okay? We have to issue more treasury bonds, which means we're going to borrow $95 billion from anybody willing to buy our treasury bonds. But we have to pay interest on it. And it's way more than $95 billion. First, it's going to end up costing $180 billion. 10 years from now, the $95 billion that we owe, because we'll be paying interest on it, that will come out to $180 billion. And then 20 years, it's $400 billion. And I don't know, every 10 years, the debt doubles because you have to pay interest on $95 billion that you're never, ever going to pay back. So by the time a baby born today is 40 years old, that $95 billion supplemental that Pete Hegseth is asking for on Tuesday, that $95 billion supplemental in 40 years will still be on the books. And because we pay interest, it will have cost us $1 trillion. Luckily, climate destruction will have already taken place, and I'm pretty certain whatever gills-based species survives, I have a feeling they'll be willing to forgive all debts. Those bonds go out about 30 years. Some of them you can go longer. Trump wants 100-year bonds. So think about the interest. And you borrow $90 billion in 30, 40 years with interest, that's $1 trillion. So in all to be honest, $95 billion in this supplemental isn't just for the war. Got to bribe Congress to pass this supplemental. About $60 to $67 billion is for the war in Iran. The rest, well, you got to bribe members of Congress. So they throw in $20 billion for farmers, Ebola, little things that we don't know about because nobody reads this crap. And of course, Trump wants some billions of dollars put in there to enforce the SAVE Act, which is yet to pass in the Senate. But he wants to fund it before it's passed. The SAVE Act is what Trump wants Congress to pass, so Americans have to produce roughly 40,000 pieces of ID in order to vote in this year's midterms. So is the supplemental going to stall? Who knows? But if it does, how are we going to fight this war without money? How are we going to fight? I'm going to come back to that in a second. The number of American soldiers is up to 17 killed after 3 were killed over the weekend. 2 in Jordan, 1 in Iraq. You know what? Check that. I think I'm getting this wrong, and I apologize. The New York Times reporting since fighting resumed. I don't have the exact numbers, so I apologize. I do know, I should know this, and I apologize. The New York Times reporting since fighting resumed, at least 100 soldiers have been injured in the past 2 weeks, and the Times is reporting that the Pentagon is keeping the exact numbers hidden, claiming it's for national security reasons. Yeah, a total of 400 American soldiers have reportedly been injured since the war started on February 28th. So I can confirm that a total of 400 American soldiers have been injured since the war began, and the number of dead is 17. I know that 100 have been injured in the past 2 weeks. I don't know of the 17 how many died in the past week, and I don't want to get that wrong, and I apologize. I really do. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are amping up their airstrikes despite both the House and the Senate passing a concurrent war powers resolution demanding an end to the fighting. The concurrent resolution, because it's a concurrent resolution and not a joint resolution, it has no teeth, since the war powers resolution has never been tested and would unlikely survive before the Supreme Court. We've been over that. So, the only way to stop any war is to defund it. And that is what the fight on Capitol Hill is all about, as the Pentagon, despite its $1 trillion a year budget for 2026, is desperately in need of 60, 78, some say $80 billion to keep the war going, even though it's a complete failure. The Strait of Hormuz remains clogged, with the price of oil jumping to what? What is it? It's up $4. Gasoline, oil is top $90 a barrel. The price of oil price of gas is nearly $4 a gallon. And again, new polling shows this to be the most unpopular war in American history. And a new intelligence report tells Congress and it tells the American people that bombing Iran will not make a dent in their vast stockpile of ballistic missiles and attack drones. On Tuesday, Democrats finally got Hegseth to admit, yeah, we haven't wiped out Iran's military capabilities. He didn't say, yeah, I've been lying to the American people. He's been lying to the American people. The Wall Street Journal out with exclusive reporting that the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad believes Iran has relocated thousands of nuclear centrifuges that are necessary for the enrichment of uranium deep into what is called Pixax Mountain or Mount Kalanj. In Iran, they call it Mount Kalanj. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Iran denies wanting a nuclear weapons program, but they do possess roughly 1,000 pounds of uranium with 60% purity. In order for it to become weapons grade, Iranian scientists would have to get it up to about 96, 98% purity. Iran was totally compliant with weapons inspectors. They obeyed the enrichment threshold established by the nuclear treaty it signed with Barack Obama and the rest of the world, including Russia and China. It took several years after Trump became president in 2017 and immediately pulled out of the Iran deal. It took several years after that for Iran to begin playing games with inspectors and enrich their uranium up to 60%. But they never needed and still don't need a nuclear weapon because, as we've since learned, they have something way more dangerous: the power to close off nearly 25% of the world's oil and 30% of the world's fertilizer supply. Hormuz. They've shut Hormuz down. With Hormuz too dangerous for tankers to pass, Iran, as they threatened, has opened up a new front as its allies and surrogate fighters in Yemen, the Houthis, waging war against Saudi Arabia. The Houthis are now firing or threatening to fire on Saudi tankers attempting to cross in or out of the Red Sea through the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Listeners of this show remember our old friend, you're looking at it, the Bab el-Mandab Strait. On the right is Yemen, and on the left is Djibouti. And so the Bab el-Mandab Strait, I've been over this. So what is it? Imagine the Strait of Hormuz, but instead of the Persian Gulf, it's the gateway to the Suez Canal, where nearly 40% of the world's shipping containers must pass. The Bab el-Mandab Strait off the coast of Yemen and Djibouti is the choke point between the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, meaning if you make it too dangerous to go through the Bab el-Mandab Strait, then the world's ships cannot pass through the Suez Canal. And there is no military, only a diplomatic solution. Yeah, it would be nice, considering we spend all this money on bombs, to say to the Houthis and the Iranians, it's our way or the highway, or more precisely, the pavement. We're going to turn you into pavement unless you do what we say. But bombs don't work when you're fighting economic terrorism or just good old-fashioned terrorism, like going after the people who were behind 9/11. Can't bomb them. It's a police action. Got to find them. That requires intelligence, something this country is desperately in need of. You cannot bomb terrorists to stop terrorism, especially economic terrorism. You can't prevent Iran or the Houthis from firing at ships trying to pass through maritime chokeholds. Because, as Donald Trump freely admitted during a press conference, all it takes is one missile or attack drone to get through. And that's it. So what closes these sea lanes isn't so much Iran as it is Lloyd's of London's actuarial tables. We're talking tankers worth tens to hundreds of millions of dollars, carrying payload also worth tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. So the ships and the content of those ships must be insured. The actual aerial tables render it prohibitive for companies to pay the insurance necessary to cross Hormuz, or now the Bab el-Mandab Strait, if there is even the slightest chance Iran or the Houthis planted one mine or might fire one attack drone. Just one. There is no military solution. There is only a diplomatic one, which means, and I know we like our bombs. I know we like shock and awe, and some of you like killing people, but you see, there's no military solution to Hormuz. This is how it works. You have to give the Houthis and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a financial incentive to make certain the sea lanes aren't mined and tankers aren't fired upon. You have to make it in their financial interest to police their own. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. It's called sharing some of the wealth. It's not socialism. That's capitalism. You pay protection money to protect your assets. That's how it works. You got to pay Lloyd's of London for insurance, but to keep your insurance premiums down, you, after performing a cost-benefit analysis, realize you also have to give money to Iran and the Houthis in Yemen to make certain they don't scare Lloyd's of London into raising the insurance on our tankers. That's how it's done. That's the only way it's done. Bombs don't work. They never work. It's money. Trump knows that. He and Jared and Steve Witkoff want to set up a $300 billion reparations fund for Iran that they can skim off the top of. They know how this war ends eventually. We got to cut a check. Like all wars, this is about money. That's it. Wars are fought over natural resources, like oil. This war is being fought because the oil companies funded Trump in 2024, and by keeping Hormuz shut, they get to charge twice as much for gasoline and liquid natural gas and fossil fuels. We get second quarter results at the end of next week from Chevron and Exxon. Those are two American oil companies, as well as ConocoPhillips, which reports their second quarter earnings in the first week of August. Now, this is what is important. This is, I went over the budget, and your eyes glaze over, as do mine. And now I'm going to go over second quarter results for the fossil fuel industry, the American fossil fuel industry. It's a little dry, but this is how you stop a war, and you have to know who wants this war and where your money is going. So this is going to be boring. So we get second quarter earnings results for the three big American oil companies. Now, the second quarter will be 3 months of Hormuz completely closed. We saw earnings double in the first quarter for the oil companies, but the first quarter begins on what? January 1st? The war began on February 28th. So the first quarter, 2/3 of the first quarter didn't absorb the full impact of Hormuz getting shut down and oil prices skyrocketing. But the second quarter, that began on April 1st, and it ended July 1st. That's 3 full months of Hormuz pretty much completely closed. 3 months of Exxon, Chevron, ConocoPhillips gouging you at the pumps. I know it's boring. It's boring. It's not interesting. Exxon is advising shareholders and analysts that when they report their second quarter earnings next week, earnings will be 3 times as high as they were the first quarter. The first quarter of the year, which was double the previous quarter. Our friends from Chevron are telling Wall Street that second quarter earnings will have quadrupled over first quarter earnings. Yes, we should be marching in the streets. Yes. But we're a nation of financial illiterates. So let me explain this, because nobody ever taught you this. I can assure you, nobody ever taught me this, because they don't want us to know about this. Okay? The only people who know about this are the ones who have enough money to buy stock in Chevron, Texaco, and ConocoPhillips, because we're dealing with numbers we can't possibly absorb. So a year is divided into quarters, and that means every 3 months is a new quarter. 4 quarters a year, and corporations are required to report their quarterly earnings, and earnings are profits. Profits. We're talking what they cleared. So if Chevron's second quarter earnings quadrupled, that means they made 4 times as much in the second quarter. That would be the months from April 1st through July 1st. That means they made 4 times as much as they did in the second quarter as they did during the first quarter, which was January 1st through April 1st. Very simply, if Chevron, say, earned $20 in the first quarter of 2026, that means they earned $80 in the second quarter. Again, those are earnings, profit, not revenue, profit. It's what they cleared. Now, ConocoPhillips, if you own stock in ConocoPhillips, you should be upset because they are the laggard. They're only expected to have increased their second quarter earnings by 1.5 times. So you need to go to a board meeting and complain. These are incredible profit margins, meaning they get to charge a lot more for their product with practically zero overhead. And how do they do it? You're paying for it. You're paying for it at the pump. You're paying for it when you try to heat your home. And you're paying for it by allowing Congress to pass a supplemental. How do they do it? The same way De Beers, the diamond company, keeps the price of a diamond artificially high. Diamonds should not be expensive. So what De Beers do, and I'm not talking about Smeigel's sketch, De Beers, this is De Beers. De Beers, they either, this is how De Beers does it. They either keep, by the way, every great sketch Robert Smigel wrote for Saturday Night Live. It's unbelievable. Where am I? De Beers. So how do they keep diamonds so expensive? Well, they either keep the diamonds in the ground, or after they remove the diamonds, they keep them off the market in order to increase demand. That's how they do it. And it was what OPEC has been doing up until this war. OPEC is a consortium of oil-rich nations who meet every so often, not so much to set the price of oil, but to set the supply. How far are we going to turn the spigot this quarter? And by deciding, coming to an agreement on how much oil we're going to produce, they set the price, supply and demand. Oil ministers meet, and depending on the health of the global economy, vis-a-vis the needs of those independent and oil-rich nations, they agree on how much oil to either produce or put into the marketplace. One could argue, probably lose the argument, but one could argue that in many ways OPEC acts like another central banker, which raises and lowers interest rates based on the temperature of the economy. If the economy is running hot, well, the central bankers raise the price of money. And what does that do? Well, it increases profits for the banks and lenders. You make money more expensive, you have to charge more interest to lend it out. The banks report record profits every time the Fed raises interest rates. And if the economy is running slowly, then the Fed will lower the price of money because there's no demand for it, because nobody's borrowing, because the economy has slowed down. And likewise, and this, it's not that hard to understand if It's supply and demand. That's all it is. If I have money and you need it, I can charge you more interest for it. That's how it works. And if you don't need the money, the only way I can get you to borrow is to keep lowering my interest rates till you go, oh, you know what? I'll borrow money. That's cheap enough. I'll borrow some of that money. Supply and demand. And the same applies to OPEC. When the economy is running especially hot, OPEC, they'll open up the spigots, but they if it's really hot, the demand allows them to charge more for oil. So they fine-tune the spigots to keep the economy hot, but not too hot. You know, they want to charge as much as they can for oil. And when the economy cools down, they really tighten the money, the oil, the Fed loosens up the money when there's a recession, and OPEC, they don't flood the market with oil because there's no demand. They want to keep the prices somewhat reasonable without plunging the world into a depression. Well, the United States is the largest producer of oil and liquid natural gas in the world, thanks to fracking, unfortunately. But we are not members of OPEC. And thanks to Obama, all domestically produced oil can now be sold on the world market. We don't have energy independence. No matter how much Trump says, drill, baby, drill, that doesn't give you energy independence because the price of oil is pegged to the international market thanks to Barack Obama. It used to be all domestically produced oil could only be sold domestically. But they changed that after fracking. When Obama became president, we had too much oil, and the oil companies came to Obama and the Republicans and the Democrats and said, "We're going to go out of business. We've fracked ourselves to death. We have to sell our oil to the world market. We can't just sell it to America because they'll be paying pennies a gallon." So why? Not enough demand. We're the largest oil producer and liquid natural gas producer in the world. If you can only sell our oil and our gas to us, there's not enough demand for the supply, and you end up paying what Venezuelans were paying for gas before we invaded, which was like 20 cents a gallon. Okay. Despite being the largest producer of oil, America, before this war, was powerless because OPEC's combined power together is bigger than ours. So who was setting the price for oil? Not the United States. OPEC was. We couldn't set the price for a barrel of oil. It was being determined by OPEC because even though we're the largest producers of petroleum products, if you add up all the oil-rich nations who are members of OPEC, they're bigger than we are. So they get to set the price. But what if we declared war on Iran and they closed Hormuz? where would the world be forced to buy its oil? America. See, that's the reason Chevron's profits are going to quadruple in the second quarter. And they didn't have to do anything. Their profits are quadrupling and they didn't have to lift a finger. It's not like they're selling more oil. In fact, they're probably selling less because it's gotten so expensive. It's not like they had any expenses, like they had to drill for oil and get it to market. No, because Hormuz is closed, they can take what they already have, what's already in the pipeline, and double the price. Pure profit. Pure profit. Supply and demand. Okay? Suppose David Feldman charged $5 for each episode of this stupid podcast. What would happen if nearly 1/3 of all the podcasts out there couldn't get distributed? Well, there'd actually be a demand for this crap, right? Still not, but let's just do this as a thought exercise. Pretend this show has an audience, okay? So I'm charging $5 now. Something happened, and nearly 25 to 30% of all podcasts are taken off iTunes and Spotify. Then I could charge, instead of $5 per episode, $10 or $15 per episode. And it would be pure profit because the costs are baked into that initial $5 that I was charging before the podcasters all disappeared. That gives me what they call pricing power, but I'm able to charge over and above what I normally charge, and that is gravy. That is just pure gravy. And the oil companies, in the second quarter and 1/3 of the first quarter, they didn't have to pay for the conditions that made it possible for them to double, triple, or quadruple their profits. We paid for it, you and me. And I know this is boring. Americans find this boring, which is why we have $2 trillion in auto debt, another $2 trillion in credit card debt. We don't like to think about this, and they don't teach us this so that the government can be $40 trillion in debt. We're all in debt. As long as they keep us financially illiterate, the rich will get richer, and we will be serfs. We will be beholden to the rich and powerful, paying back. We'll be like sharecroppers trying to pay back for use of the farm. It's crypto neo-feudalism. You're paying for it. We pay more for oil right now, and we pay more for the bombs that led to Iran closing down Hormuz, as well as the naval blockade for when Iran decides to open up Hormuz, or because Iran is charging a toll. Never forget this. Never forget. Donald Trump is also blockading Hormuz. Because as Marco Rubio testified, if Iran is going to close off the world's oil and fertilizer supply, we're going to do it for them. And, it's music versus lyrics. The music sounded great. The lyrics made no sense. Kind of embarrassing, as a matter of fact. Like a John Lennon song. The music is great. Go figure out what he's saying. But it's, if you're just listening to the music, if Iran is going to close down the world's supply of oil and fertilizer, we're going to do it for them. The crowd goes nuts. Until you ask them, what? So we're outsmarting Iran. Trump doesn't know what to do. He has no idea how to fix the mess he's made. Other than drop bombs we no longer have, he has no idea what to do. Now, to give him a little benefit of the doubt, he didn't think Hormuz would get closed once he started bombing. He was warned that was a possibility, but he figured if they close Hormuz, the world will blame Iran, and it would be World War III or World War IV, depending on how you're keeping score. But they closed Hormuz, and guess who the world blamed? The turd, the orange turd. He didn't think they would, but they did, because they said to him, don't do it. Don't do it. They're going to close down Hormuz. You don't want to do this. There's no way to open it up. In fact, Keith Kellogg, who was Trump's national security, he was Mike Pence's national security advisor during the first Trump administration. And then I think when Michael Flynn had to quit because he lied to the FBI, Kellogg was in the Oval Office giving national security advice. General Kellogg is now saying it's time to send troops in to open up Hormuz, ground troops. Keith Kellogg is calling for ground troops to honor the memory of the dearly departed Lindsey Graham. So there are some people, the Curtis LeMay types, they want to send in troops to seize Hormuz. How do you think that's going to play out? How do you think that would work out? And if somehow we're able to hold Hormuz and you're the mother, the wife, the husband, the child, the aunt, the uncle, the friend of a loved one currently serving in the military, what is the price you're willing to pay so Donald Trump doesn't have to admit he's the biggest idiot in the world? Are you willing to sacrifice a loved one so Donald Trump could just make more mistakes? Do you for 1 second think Pete Hegseth and Dan Kane and Donald Trump are equipped to send our military into Hormuz? Do you? There's what we should be able to do and what we can. We should, given that we spend $1 trillion a year on defense, we should be able to say to Iran, open up Hormuz, you got 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium at 60%, give it to us. We should. I mean, that's $1 trillion should buy us that. It should. There's what we should be able to do and what we can't. And if you don't know what you can't do, you end up getting beaten up in a bar. You end up having a couple of drinks and mouthing off to the wrong guy, and you're lying face down in a pool of your own blood, feces, urine, and in my case, because I'm a masochist, semen. Because that's basically why a lot of people get into fistfights. They want to get beaten up. And, so you end up in a pool of your own blood, urine, feces, and semen. Because these guys, Pete Hegseth, something seriously wrong with his ballistic missiles. They don't fire properly. His own mother put that into writing. It's not good when your own mother knows you got problems with your Tomahawk missiles. Okay, so I'm going to give Donald Trump some credit. I am. He didn't really believe Hormuz would get shut down once he began bombing. This was his calculus. He thought, you know what? The price of oil will spike simply because there's a war in the Middle East. And the oil companies, which paid for along with Elon Musk and Charlie Kirk, but the oil companies, they paid for my 2024 campaign. They'll be happy because price of oil always spikes when there's a war in the Middle East. And the oil companies will make, a nice little profit. He never thought Chevron's profits would quadruple in the second quarter of the year because Iran actually closed Hormuz. He thought, we'll give them a little war. The price of oil spikes. They get a 20% bump for the first quarter and second quarter. Nobody here in America thought the oil companies would strike gold, which they did when Hormuz closed. They figured, just like when Putin invaded Ukraine, that oil prices would spike just enough for the oil companies to book a pretty good profit. They never expected this. Donald Trump is too good to be true if you're an oil executive. He works for the fossil fuel industry. That's who he works for. He's taking your tax dollars and paying energy companies right now to shut down their offshore wind turbines based on the lie that wind turbines are more expensive than, say, coal. And he says with a straight orange face, worse for the environment than beautiful, clean coal. They paid total, it's a French company, $1 billion to just shut down a wind farm project off, I think it was South Carolina. $1 billion to shut down. They said, we will pay you $1 billion not to produce wind. This is a transfer of wealth, because why do they don't want Total producing wind? Because they're working for Trump is working for the fossil fuel industry. Wind is bad for the fossil fuel industry. It's transferring wealth from our nation's treasury into the coffers of the fossil fuel industry, as well as the government contractors who also take in billions. They take in billions by producing the weapons and hardware needed to keep the war machine going. This war was and is about money. Donald Trump gets up every morning and thinks about money. It's the only thing he thinks about. You and I don't, which is why we don't have any, which is why the Democrats have to run on money. Otherwise, you're not going to win. You have to say to the 99%, and I've been over this a million times, and I'm going to say it again. There are rules to the game, and the first rule of the game is know what the game is. And the game in Washington, D.C. is money, power, and revenge. That's the game. Sorry, money, power, and revenge. If you come to Washington and you're not trying to get money, power, and revenge, you're playing tennis on a football field and you're going to get destroyed. You need money. So you want to win an election? You raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. You do what New Jersey Democrat Andy Kim is proposing. Semaphore out with a story today. He's proposing universal health care for kids, Medicare for children. Junior senator from New Jersey. Not only, we can afford it, obviously. How is that not a winning message for the midterms? Medicare for all children. Do I have to explain to you what is wrong with the Democratic Party when Senator Andy Kim, Democrat, is proposing universal health care for children? If that's not a political, if you cannot win on that message, then the United States, it's over. Come on. If you can't win the midterms promising universal health care for kids, there is something seriously wrong with the American people. But because there's something wrong with the Democratic Party. It's run by millionaires. So, money. This is all about money, power, and revenge. You need money, and then you got to take it from the wealthy. They've been taking it from us. We take it from them. We have the power. And then revenge, as in, 2 million people behind bars sounds about right, but these aren't the right people who should be behind bars. We lock up the corporate criminals, the white-collar criminals. Okay. So, the war. You got to know how to frame the argument and frame the conversation. You can talk all you want about the War Powers Act and whether concurrent resolutions will hold up under the Supreme Court's scrutiny. You can do that all you want. It's theatrics. And they do that so you don't pay attention to money. If you want to stop a war, you stop paying for it. Yeah, it's that easy. You know how they tell you take deep breaths and drink plenty of water and your life will be perfect? And you go, no, it can't be that simple. I need supplements and I need to join a gym. No. Take deep breaths, drink plenty of water, and go for a walk. No, it's got to be more complicated than that. You want to stop a war? Stop paying for it. And this is what makes me really pissed off. I'm in a rage over the war, the immorality, the dishonesty, the intellectual falsehoods that people spew because they don't want to tell you the truth, which is this war is good for me. I'm benefiting from it. So you lie. And everyone in the media, and I don't like to piss on the media, but they do a pretty piss poor job explaining to the American people what is going on with this supplemental right now before Congress. If you read the best news sources, I am stunned by this. They are unable, unwilling, maybe too stupid to explain what is being debated right now before Congress. And if you can't explain to the American people what is actually being debated and what's really important, they tune out, which they do. They've tuned out because nobody takes the time to be teachers, to explain this is what's going on. This is what's going on. And they don't tell you this because it's kind of embarrassing for them. What's being debated is the only thing that decides whether there's war or peace. The supplemental. The supplemental, the supplemental, the supplemental. It's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that should be discussed. It's great. The No Kings marches are great. The supplemental. Whether or not the war is illegal or not, whether or not it's constitutional, the supplemental. Debate the supplemental. Yes, Iran shouldn't have a nuclear bomb. They're never going to get one, but forget that. The supplemental. Are you for the supplemental? Do you want to pay for it? What about ground troops? You want to send in ground troops? It's the supplemental and ground troops. That's how you frame the argument. Stop debating whether this war is constitutional. It's not. Stop debating whether it's legal. It's not. Whether Iran has a nuclear weapons program. They don't. Stop debating whether we can defeat Iran. We can't. Stop debating whether we need to keep bombing Iran until they open Hormuz. We can't, and they won't. We don't have enough bombs. They do. We don't. Pete Hegseth said that under oath on Capitol Hill Tuesday. Stop debating and arguing whether Trump, Hegseth, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, are deceiving the American people about the cost, about why they want to keep bombing. The only question every American needs to ask Congress to answer is the supplemental, $95 billion. Do you support taking $95 billion over and above what we've already allocated to the Pentagon for fiscal year 2026, which is close to $1 trillion? Do you support giving the Pentagon an additional $90 billion to finish a never-ending forever war with Iran? That's all that you should be asking. And do you support ground troops? Now, it's $67 billion. That's about what Hegseth is asking for. And then $20 billion extra to make it more attractive for Congress. You know, they'll stick $20 billion in for the farmers, Ebola, maybe the SAVE Act, if it's ever passed. That way members of Congress have political cover to vote for this war supplemental. That's what they do. They dirty up a clean supplemental by adding $30 billion on top of the $67 or $65 billion that Hegseth and Trump want for the war. You have to believe me when I tell you, if Congress doesn't pass the war supplemental, the war is over, unless, and this is very important, unless Congress increases the Pentagon's budget from $1 trillion in 2026 to $1.5 trillion in 2027. That's a 50% increase. Do you want to give this Pentagon a 50% increase? Why does Donald Trump want $500 billion more dollars to give to the Pentagon for just fiscal year 2027. Right? Work requirements for Medicaid, work requirements for food stamps. Have you seen what's happening to the American people? One big beautiful bill is dumping paperwork on disabled Americans, making it so it's impossible for them to get food stamps and Medicaid. But $500 million more for the Pentagon. Well, why does Trump want to give his Pentagon an extra $500 million a year? Because then there's no more debate on a war supplemental. Then he gets to $500 billion to wage war each year. That's about what you need, $500 billion, to fight a couple wars around the world. So good luck getting the mainstream media, legitimate news organizations to explain this as clearly as I just did. And good luck having an audience who stays with you when you talk about what I just did. People don't want to think about money. They don't want to think about their own money. They don't want to think about their own debt. So they certainly don't want to think about government debt, which is our debt. You know, how much some of us pay taxes. And this is about dollars and cents. And until the American people realize that there are nobody's passing a bill like Social Security anymore. You're not going to get Medicare passed or Medicaid passed or the Equal Housing Bill passed. Everything now is an effing budget bill. Obamacare was a budget bill. So how you spend money reflects what your priorities are as an individual and as a nation. We're never going to get the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 65 passed again. Never going to happen. It's all going to be hidden in a budget bill. That's how they do things, sub rosa. All your values as a nation are expressed through earmarks and addendums and amendments to a budget bill. That's where the action is, because nobody reads a budget bill. Nobody understands the budget process. They dirty up these bills so you can't figure out what you're paying for. So wars are fought to transfer our nation's wealth into the pockets of weapon manufacturers and all the other privately owned government contractors who profit from war. It's not about patriotism. And of course, the victims are our real treasure, the soldiers, who are convinced this is about freedom. Okay, I should wrap it up. So I want to talk about Sunny Hostin. How much time do I have? Yeah, I'll wrap it up with her. Is anybody still here? I don't know. I've been doing long shows again. I don't watch The View. Do I want to talk about Sunny Hostin? I'll save it for another show. Her son was handcuffed her black son handcuffed because he was jogging by the railroad tracks and didn't see the sign that said you're not allowed here. Harvard graduate, black, early 20s, and the police stop him and immediately handcuffed him. But what's the issue? Sonny Hostin, who's on The View, said to the police officer, I'm Sonny Hostin. I'm on The View. My son graduated from Harvard. And people are going, oh, she's using her privilege to what? To prevent a police officer from shooting her son in the back because he's black? Yeah, I would say the same thing if I were Sonny Hostin. But the bigots and the racists, oh, she's using her privilege as a star of The View to keep her black son from getting shot in the back by a cop. Who arrests a kid is jogging along the railroad tracks. He doesn't see that it says no trespassing. He made a mistake. Handcuffed. You think that would have happened to a white Harvard graduate in his early 20s? I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. All right, I kept it short, sort of. Yeah, I'm pissed off. I am. Thank you to Bob and Mila for keeping the conversation civil in the chat room. Leave a comment. If I made any mistakes, let me know. I always, if I make any mistakes, I will always issue a correction. So I went over a lot of things today, and there was a lot of math involved. So if I didn't get the numbers right, 40-year bonds, 100-year bonds, 30-year bonds, money doubling every 10 years. If you want to take exception to that, send me the math. But get your facts straight. Some people have been correcting me. So I got pissed off. Somebody on one of my shows left a comment somewhere saying, every state in America requires you show a birth certificate and a driver's license in order to vote. Every state in America. And I thought, you can't do that here. You can't correct me when you're wrong. So, but if I'm wrong, correct me. Or if you want to piss me off, do what that person did. Go to davidfeldmanshow.com before it crashes and hit my show prep. If you want to read all the articles that went into the production of this show or our next show, hit the show prep button, and it's refreshed every 15 minutes. I set up a feed, so it's tailored for me. It's all my sources. It's where I go for the truth. And I'm making it available to you. It's just links to all the articles I read or I'm about to read. It's what's sitting on my desk, or about to sit on my desk. That show prep, I really recommend you go there every day and check it out, because it's what I'm reading and what I read is important. The other thing we have on the show, I built this website myself. The other thing I put in there is something called the Big Dig, which are the notes that I had trouble working off today. I have what are called notes. I think that's the word. And I want to share with you the notes that I work off when I'm stumbling through the show. These are the bullet points and the facts that I want to mention, and I'm making them available to all my listeners free of charge, which is probably still too expensive, but you can get it for free. All I ask is you surrender your first name and your email address, because I don't want bots. You know why. And if you, and I want to keep some kind of, if you give me your email address, I won't share it, but I am being deplatformed because of my hot ass. So I need to be able to contact the people who are interested in my show notes. So I need your email. And, but the show prep, I don't need your emails for that. What else? I think I'm going to take a nap in front of everybody. Just going to drift off. This is the only time I'm relaxed. The minute I turn the lights off and the camera off, it's back to this. Okay. I covered everything. Like it, share it, everything else. Thank you.